Hello everyone. I would like to thank Movement Master Academy Global Healthcare Association organizers Dr. Pradyut sir for conducting this mega event. Today I would like to present the topic on glenoid labrum injury. Myself, Mergu Sahitya of MPT second year orthopedics from SWIMS Tirupati. The contents which I am going to discuss is introduction part, epidemiology, anatomy and biomechanics, mechanism of injury, risk factors, classification of the lesions, associated pathological conditions, clinical presentation, differential diagnosis, physical examination, radiological findings, management, and post-operative rehabilitation, and return to sports. Coming to the introduction, the shoulder joint is considered a ball and socket joint. However, the socket, that is the glenoid fossa of the scapula, is quite shallow and small, covering at most only a third of the ball, that is the head of the humerus. The socket is deepened by the glenoid labrum. The glenoid labrum is a firm, wide structure that form a ring around the glenoid cavity, that is the cup of the ball and socket shoulder joint. So the glenoid labrum is a densely fibrous tissue that is located along the periphery of the glenoid portion of the scapula. It functions to provide increased stability while still allowing the greatest range of motion. In addition, it serves as an attachment point for tendons and ligaments. If the labrum is torn, the shoulder can become unstable. So this is what happens in shoulder dislocations and instability. Different injury mechanisms can be different tears in various sites around the labrum. Tears can occur in all the regions of the labrum. The two most common sites including the superior labral anterior posterior tear, that is nothing but slap tear, occurring with forced traction of the shoulder and a direct compression, and the Bankot lesion created by episodes of anterior instability. Symptoms of deep-seated pain or anterior instability are the most common presentations. Coming to the epidemiology, the younger groups are more prone with repetitive overhead motions such as swimming, tennis, or throwing activities. Older groups are more prone to degenerative lesions, often associated with poor vascular supply. Coming to the anatomy of the shoulder joint, a shoulder joint is a ball and socket type of joint that has two main stabilizers, that is the dynamic stability and static stability. The dynamic stability is given by the rotator cuff muscles, and static stability is given by labral ligamentous complex. The primary function of the rotator cuff muscles is to centralize the humeral head, limiting superior translation during the abduction. The glenohumeral joint is the most commonly dislocated joint. So the normal glenoid labrum height and width are 3 mm and 4 mm. So the glenoid labrum is a densely fibrous tissue that is located along the periphery of the glenoid portion of the scapula. The outer labrum transitions from the periphery to its articulation with glenoid. Labrum increases the height and width of the glenoid while also giving extra depth to the joint. This provides the increased stability while still allowing the greatest range of motion. Coming to the image A, this is the normal labrum, this is the effective glenoid depth with the intact labrum, and this is the effective glenoid depth with a labral tear. So I have already said that static stability is by ligaments and tendons, which consist of glenoid labrum, that is nothing but the meniscus of shoulder, which is similar to the knee meniscus, capsule and ligaments, rotator cuff passive tension, negative intra-articular pressure, and dynamic stability by muscle contraction. That includes rotator cuff muscles and long head of biceps contraction and scapular retractors. Coming to the rotator cuff muscles and its line of action, coming to the supraspinatus, its origin is on the superior, on the medial two-third of supraspinatus fossa and inserts onto the superiorly on greater tubercle of humerus, and it helps in the abduction part. It gives the stabilization of humeral head, and the direction of the action line is towards the towards the trapezius muscle. And infraspinatus, origin of infraspinatus, it's the posterior surface of scapula below the spine and inserts on the greater tubercle on posterior side. It gives it helps in the action of horizontal abduction and external rotation. The action line is towards the medial border of spine. Coming to the teres minor, the origin of teres minor is on the posterior scapula lateral border, and it inserts into the greater tubercle of humerus on posterior side. It helps in the action of horizontal abduction and external rotation, but the direction is little lower than the infraspinatus. And coming to the subscapularis muscle, the origin of the subscapularis, it's on the entire anterior surface of subscapular fossa, inserts into the lesser tubercle of humerus. So its action line is same along the line of infraspinatus. It helps in the adduction, internal rotation, and extension, gives stabilization of the humeral head. So the attachment of the glenohumeral ligaments and the long head of biceps anchored to the labrum are stronger than the attachment of labrum to the glenoid rib. So therefore, the glenoid labrum is commonly torn or avulsed when excessive force is applied to a glenohumeral ligament or the long head of biceps. The vascular supply to the labrum is from the posterior humeral circumflex artery, the circumflex scapular branch of the subscapular artery, and the suprascapular artery. These arteries come from the periphery of the labrum, making the articular margins of the labrum avascular. It has also been shown that the superior labrum has less vascular supply than the inferior labrum. The long head of biceps tendon has a variable attachment to the labrum and the glenoid. So the vascularity of the labrum decreases with increasing age, and there are no mechanoreceptors have been identified within the glenoid labrum. Coming to the biomechanics part of glenoid labrum, it enhances shoulder stability in four distinct ways. The first thing, it produces a chalk block effect, that is between the glenoid and the humeral head, that serves to limit humeral head translation force. So chalk block effect is nothing but it is an effect that the glenoid labrum acts as chalk block, and it resists the glenohumeral transition force. Because and it increases the depth and the contact area between glenoid and humeral head, resisting the translation force of the translation force. And the second important concept is it increases the concavity compression effect between the humeral head and the glenoid. So this is nothing but it's a stabilizing mechanism in which the compression of the convex humeral head into a concave glenoid fossa stabilizes it against the translating force. So stability is related to the depth of the concavity and magnitude of compressive force. So in this way, it enhances the shoulder stability. The third thing is it contributes to the stabilizing effect of the long head of biceps anchor, and it increases the overall depth of the glenoid fossa. Therefore, the glenoid labrum plays an important role in contributing the joint stability. Coming to the etiological factors, compression injury from a foot injury, that's nothing but falling onto an outstretched hand, and overhead repetitive activities such as throwing and swimming. Traction injuries, that is water skiing, breaking fall from height, or pulling. Direct blow to the humerus, dislocation or subluxations of the shoulder, that is repetitive shoulder subluxations with increased capsular laxity may also result in blunting or tearing of labrum. Internal impingement, degenerative process. If the labrum is disrupted enough to get in the way of humeral head movement, this will cause pain with arm movement. Bucket handle tear, fraying, detachment from the glenoid rim, and loose bodies from the labrum can also be the sources of shoulder symptoms. These are the common etiological factors that cause this glenoid labrum injury. These are the possible causes of SLAP lesions: overuse through the trauma and through chronic degenerative shoulder dislocation, sudden falling or accidents that affect the shoulder sports activities. These are the some of the possible causes of SLAP lesions. And coming to the mechanism of injury, the mechanism can be due to trauma or overuse. So due to trauma, the compression, that is a foot injury, falling onto an outstretched arm, and bracing in an RTC, and traction. Coming to the overuse mechanism injury, eccentric activity of biceps during arm deceleration and follow through phase of throwing. Long head of biceps pulls away at labrum. This is nothing but peel back mechanism. Abduction and maximal external rotation, base of biceps twist and pulls at labrum, and also during late cocking phase. This is the mechanism of injury for glenoid labrum injuries. One of the mechanism is peel back mechanism of slap injury. So this is a mechanism where when the shoulder is placed in a position of maximal external rotation, the rotation force produces the rotation produces a torsional force to the base of the biceps anchor. This is nothing but when a shoulder is externally rotated, an upper arm muscle, that is long head of biceps, tears or peel back from the labrum, as due to its attachment. It has a 40 to 60% of attachment from the supraglenoid tubercle. This is a mechanism of injury while playing different type of while playing the rugby, or different type of activities that cause the slap lesions or glenoid labrum injuries. In this first one's tri-scorer, this mechanism will this type of mechanism will cause the Bankart lesion, slap lesion, and rotator cuff injuries. And this is a tackler mechanism. It also causes the same Bankart lesion, slap lesion, and HAGL, that is humeral avulsion glenohumeral ligament injury. This is the direct impact injuries. This mechanism will cause complex labral injuries, bony glenoid injuries, and rotator cuff injuries. This is a flexed fall. This mechanism will cause posterior labral injuries and reverse humeral avulsion glenohumeral ligament injury. These are the different types of mechanism. That means in all of these mechanism, the shoulder is on mostly it is in the external rotation position, and also in the outstretched position. Risk factors for the glenoid labrum injury, the most important risk factors are participation in sports. So micro trauma secondary to the shear force directed at the glenoid and the labrum. The second risk factor is trauma, the force translating the humeral head related to the glenoid, and anterior or posterior shoulder instability. This is the increased risk secondary to increased translation of humeral head. And glenoid dysplasia, this is a bony deficiency of the posterior-inferior glenoid rim, and hypertrophy of surrounding cartilage can increase the risk of tear from the shear forces. These are the most important risk factors for the glenoid labrum injuries. So the next thing, while coming to the classification of glenoid labrum injuries, either due to direct trauma, the dislocation of shoulder may cause isolated or extensive labral injury. And the other classification includes the anterior labral tear, or it's known as Bankart lesion, and posterior labral tears, or the reverse Bankart lesion, and slap lesion, that is the superior labrum anterior and posterior tears. Injuries could be the combination of these lesions and can extend anteriorly, posteriorly, or the inferiorly. So this is the Snyder classification. In this, it includes the slap type 1. This is a partial tear and degeneration of this to the superior labrum, where the edges are rough and fray along the free margin, but the labrum is not completely detached. Treatment is usually to clean the edges. Here there is a rough labrum with fraying. This is the type 1 slap tear. And coming to the slap type 2 is the commonest type of slap tears. In this, the superior labrum is completely torn off the glenoid due to an injury, often a shoulder dislocation. This type leaves a gap between the articular cartilage and the labrum attachment to the bone. So type 2 slap tears can be further divided into, subdivided into slap tear type 2 anterior and the posterior, and combined anteroposterior lesions. So treatment is reattachment of the labrum, a slap repair. This is done arthroscopically using suture anchors. This is a type 2A, that means the anterior lesion. This is type 2B, that is the posterior lesion. This is the anterior and this is the posterior. And this is both antero-posterior, combination of antero-posterior. And coming to the SLAP type 3, a type 3 tear is a bucket handle tear of the labrum, where the torn labrum hangs into the joint and causes symptoms of locking and popping or clunking. The treatment usually involves removal of the bucket handle segment and then repair of any remaining detached unstable labrum. This is done arthroscopically using suture anchors. And this is the type 3, where the torn hangs into the joint. And next one is SLAP type 4. The type 4 SLAP tear is one where the tear of the labrum extends into the long head of biceps tendon. So treatment is reattachment of the labrum and repair of the biceps tear or a biceps tenodesis. This is done arthroscopically using suture anchors. These are the Snyder classification of SLAP lesions or SLAP tears. So this is the type 1 and this is type 2, which is the most commonest one, and this is type 3 and this is type 4. So we also define the site of the tears by describing the glenoid face as a clock, where the top one is at 12 o'clock, and next to that is 3 o'clock is at the front, and 9 o'clock is at the back. This for ease of the use, this applies to both left and right shoulders. And when the tear is at the top of the shoulder, that is superior, 1 o'clock to the 11 o'clock, it is called a SLAP tear. If the tear is at the front of the shoulder, that is anterior, 3 o'clock to the 6 o'clock, it is called Bankot tear. So this is a SLAP tear and this is a Bankot tear. So when the tear is at the back of the shoulder, that is posterior, 6 o'clock to 11 o'clock, it is called a reverse Bankot tear. And when a tear is a combination of Bankot, reverse Bankot and a SLAP tear, it is known as a 270-degree tear. These are the four different clockwise classification of the SLAP tears. Coming to the signs and symptoms of SLAP tears: aching of the shoulder region, feeling of instability, clicking or clunking, popping with motion, catching of the shoulder with movement, and the diffused upper trapezius pain, diffused thoracic pain. And if the shoulder is irritable, it may cause peripheral numbness or tingling, causing impingement of nerves through the shoulder complex. Symptoms will have a peripheral distribution, which is usually correlated with shoulder irritability. Aggravating factors factors are overhead activity, lifting objects, hand behind the back, and computer or desk work. And relieving factors include out of aggravating position, activities and movements that facilitate scapular retraction, and the rest that implies rest, ice, compression, and elevation, NSAIDs, shoulder adductor or internal rotated position, which is a loose back position of shoulder joint. And coming to the 24-hour symptom pattern, in the morning, the shoulder may feel increased stiffness and pain, which may loosen up as the day goes on. In the afternoon or evening, pain in the injured region will typically increases as shoulder activity increases throughout the day. Sleeping may or may not be problematic for this kind of lesions. Past history for this region, history of secondary or internal impingement, history of overhead activity such as throwing, and history of instability that includes dislocations, subluxations, and multidirectional instability. History of joint degeneration. Because of the degenerative and progressive nature of rotator cuff degradation, the patient will often complain of several bouts of shoulder pain over the course of several years. And each subsequent episode of shoulder pain is generally worse than the prior episode. Patient will often report the latest episodes as unresolved with increasing loss of range of motion. Coming to the physical examination, it includes postural abnormalities like forward shoulder, protracted scapula, scapular winging, poor scapulohumeral rhythm with AROM, and sulcus sign, excessive thoracic kyphosis, internally rotated humerus, overly developed anterior musculature with a decreased tone in posterior musculature. Palpation findings include the deep aching pain, general diffuse pain to palpation, increased tone at upper trapezius, increased tightness at anterior shoulder, increased tightness at posterior scapular muscles, and sounds like crepitus, clicking, popping with active range of motion or passive range of motion. The capsular findings include the tight posterior capsule, hypermobile anterior capsule, multidirectional instability, and positive sulcus. Muscle strength findings include weak or painful with resistance of involved tendons, and weak scapular stabilizers, which include lower trapezius, rhomboid muscles, and serratus anterior muscle. Coming to the radiological findings or objective test, most of the research with the diagnostic orthopedic test is inconclusive and contradictory. These tests should not be used as standalone findings to diagnose a labral tear, but rather the combination of findings, a detailed history, and corroborating objective findings should be used to determine the most likely diagnosis. MRI results may show disruption of the labrum, but the severity and the degree of tear will not be known without arthroscopic examination. So false negatives of MRI are not uncommon. X-ray may reveal osteoarthritis, humeral head displacement, and Hill-Sachs lesions. So the common test, physical examination test for diagnosing the superior labral anterior posterior tears are active compression test, that is O'Brien test. It has pain and increased in pronated position. The procedure is arm is in the forward flexed to 90 degrees, adducted across the body. Patient resists down the force on arm in pronated and supinated position of the forearm. So indication of positive test results is pain is increased in pronated position. And the crank test, it is arm is abducted greater than 100 degrees in the scapular plane. Elbow is flexed to 90 degrees. Axial force is applied through the humerus onto the glenohumeral joint, and shoulder is rotated. Indication of positive test result, pain, catching, and clicking. Pain provocative test. So the patient abducts the shoulder to 90 degrees, flexes the elbow to 90 degrees, and pronates and supinates the hand. Indication of positive test result is pain is worse or present only in pronation. Biceps load test. So patient is in the supine position, shoulder is abducted to 90 degrees, elbow is flexed to 90 degrees, shoulder is externally rotated to a point at which patient feel pain, apprehension, or maximum external rotation. The patient then performs resisted flexion of the elbow. So indication of positive test result is worsening of pain when resisted elbow flexion is performed. Compression rotation test. The position of the patient, supine position, shoulder is abducted to 90 degrees, elbow is flexed to 90 degrees, axial load is placed on the glenohumeral joint, and the humerus is rotated. Indication of positive test result, pain, catching, clicking, or snapping sounds. Next test is anterior slide test. Patient is sitting, patient is in the seated position and places hands on the hips with thumbs facing posterior. Then the examiner places a finger over the anterior shoulder and other hand pushes up on the humerus superiorly and anteriorly. Patient is asked to resist. So indication of positive test result is pain or click sound. So coming to the evidence, most important test for out of all these tests are O'Brien test is the most valid one because it has a 100% sensitivity and 98.5% specificity. And this is the commonest test for slap pathology, but sensitivity suffers if there are concomitant shoulder pathologies. And the remaining all other one which has higher sensitivity test is pain provocation test. It has also 100% sensitivity and the specificity rating is 90%. The next test is anterior slide test. It has a sensitivity of 78.4% and specificity of 91.5%. It is active resistance against anterior humeral translation. So these are the evidence or the sensitivity and specificity percentage for physical examination test. Coming to the differential diagnosis, we can the differential diagnosis include biceps strain or rupture, shoulder dislocation or subluxation, AC joint sprain, rotator cuff tear, cervical radiculopathy, fracture or heel sac lesions. So coming to rule out the slap tears or glenoid labrum tears, checking in the past, checking in the history, that is a throwing injury or compressive or distraction force for the shoulder, either traumatic injury that involves substantial forces on the glenohumeral joint results in this type of history, and a history of fall onto outstretched hand or elbow, wrist without glenohumeral joint adducted and extended position. So out of these injuries, and out of these history, the symptoms include catching, clicking, popping, locking, and grinding. There is a deep shoulder pain, pain with overhead activity, and pain with axial loading. There is a sense of instability. There is a decreased range of motion and decreased muscle strength. So we can rule out labral tears, like labral tear, as when the positive test of biceps load test 1, biceps load test 2, internal rotation resistance test, Kim test, and jerk test. These are the different tests for ruling the labral tears. And instability, to rule out the instability, the positive result of apprehension test and relocation test. And to rule out the impingement, Hawkins-Kennedy test, Neer's impingement test, horizontal adduction resistance, and Yoakum test. To rule out rotator cuff lesions, rotator cuff injury, empty can test, drop sign, painful arc, and external rotation lag sign. These are the different tests to diagnose diagnose the labral tears. Coming to the treatment part, surgical options include debridement of the labrum and anchoring of the labrum or biceps attachment. Surgical options for Bankart lesion include debridement of the labrum, anchoring of the labrum, inferior glenohumeral joint ligament or joint capsule, and capsular shift. Surgery outcomes: 80 to 95% of patients who received a slap lesion repair achieve a satisfactory result. So this is the treatment of slap lesion by Apostolis et al. For the slap 1 tear, conservative theory or conservative therapy or debridement. For the slap type 2, if the young active patients with the recent trauma and good quality of labrum, slap repair must be done. And if for the older patients, inactive patient, poor quality of labrum, intra-articular comorbidities, if they are present, then tenotomy or tenodesis can be the surgical option. Slap type 3, the therapy, the treatment for this is resection of bucket handle tear. And slap type 4, if the age is greater than 40 and low activity level and there is no any aesthetic issues, tenotomy of biceps tendon should be done. And if the age is less than 40, higher with high activity level and with aesthetic issues, tenodesis of biceps tendon should be done. Coming to the rehabilitation part, rehabilitation can be classified into 2 categories: preoperative or conservative treatment and postoperative treatment. Preoperative includes the main objective of the preoperative patient is to increase available range of motion, prevent adhesive capsulitis, and strengthen surrounding muscles to prepare for possible postoperative rehabilitation. Also, the goal is to decrease irritability as much as possible. Once the inflammation process has decreased, the focus of rehabilitation should be on increasing the range of motion and the strength. Care should be taken for biceps irritation with a slap lesion. And 90-90 shoulder position and inferior traction should be minimized with Bankart lesions. So for timeline or goals for the goals of PT for post-operative for the week of 0 to 6 weeks, repair should be protected. Scapular exercises or active motion in uninvolved joints, and submaximal isometric strengthening of shoulder and elbow should be given. And from the week 6 to 9, initiate rotator cuff or scapular neuromuscular control exercises, strengthening in elevation activities, limitation of weight bearing activity. And from the week 9 to 24, strength should be normalized, endurance, power and stability also should be normalized, and sports specific exercises should be encouraged. Goals are dependent on patient's activity. And timeline or goals for the non-operative patients. Phase 1 includes decreased pain and inflammation. Modalities like ice, electrical stimulation should be applied, and NSAIDs should be given, and functional ROM should be re-established, and muscular balance should be maintained. For the phase 2, orthokinematics should be normalized, and neuromuscular control, strength should be improved, and proprioception should be encouraged. And for the phase 3, enhanced dynamic stabilization, strength, endurance should be improved along with neuromuscular control. And for the phase 4, maintain the level of power, strength, endurance and the agility, progress activity level to prepare for full functional return to sport or activity. This is different kind of weight bearing activities and resistance activities. This is the neuromuscular control exercise, and TENS, application of TENS for the control of pain management. ROM or stretching includes Codman's exercises in the 4-way direction, scapular mobility exercises, passive external rotation, internal rotation and flexion, active flexion using stick or bar exercise, pulleys, table slides, and cross body stretches. Strengthening exercises include isometric internal rotators, external rotators, flexion, extension, and ball squeezing activities, prone lying extension, horizontal abduction, and scaption exercises, biceps curls, and wrist should be exercised in all the 4 directions, gripping exercises, serratus anterior strengthening exercises like wall push or press-ups. These are the strengthening activities that should be encouraged for the patient. And prognosis, a shoulder with a labral tear will vary in terms of the length of rehabilitation. If the shoulder pain does not resolve in 4 weeks, the prognosis decreases significantly and surgery becomes more likely. 80 to 95% of patients who received a slap lesion repair achieve a satisfactory result. 80 to 98% of patients who received a Bankart repair achieve a satisfactory result. Outcomes will be limited by following activities. An overly arthritic joint would limit the prognosis. Excessive labral damage and rotator cuff lesions involvement. The time frame of labral repair rehabilitation from 3 to 6 months, fully functional for the ADLs is rehabilitated. For 5 to 9 months, fully functional are sports and overhead activities. References.